This is August 10th, 2020, and this is Mitch's Minutes, live from Middletown, Pennsylvania. Mitch Carson, live.
Hello, I'm Mitch Carson and welcome to Mitch's Minutes. As you can see, I have moved my broadcast day outside on this beautiful Monday afternoon. And now with the circumstances of COVID-19 has forced things to go a certain direction, today's show is going in that certain direction as well. And the big target this time is schools. A new school year is just around the corner, but this year for states, the country, and the world is different, with COVID-19 still in the air. Schools all over are scrambling to figure out how to start the year, and some schools are already in session, and some students have dealt with confirmed positive cases of coronavirus. Some schools are given the option to have in-person, phased-in, or remote learning. Parents are still unsure of what they want their kids to do, and parents obviously do not want their kids to get the virus, and kids want to be in school with their friends. Fall sports for schools are in hot water as well, and worries are kids being in contact with other kids during physical activity. And as of right now, fall sports have been delayed for some schools, but the question is they still don't know whether or not they will be able to play. And recommendations from the CDC and individual states and departments of health are still changing and causing schools to adjust. And schools are currently adjusting day in and day out. And how will the year be like? That still is a question mark. But one person who might be able to help us out with that is a teacher herself. She's been teaching at Central Dauphin East High School in Harrisburg for the past 32 years. For many broadcasts, you have heard her, but you have never seen her. Well, now she takes her turn at the interview chair today. My mom, Cassandra Carson. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks for wanting me, Mitch.
My pleasure. So, out of all your 32 years of teaching, you've never seen something like this, have you?
Nope, this is a first.
So, like, when you say this is the first, would this be different or the same compared to when we had the swine flu back in 2009?
This is different in that it was unknown. We had a little bit better data on swine flu. We also knew that swine flu really only targeted children, and schools could help with a vaccination process because there was one, just like there's a flu vaccination. We're not in that situation with COVID, so schools had to shut down when it was first realized that COVID was in our country, because we just didn't know a lot about how the spread would be here. We could only follow what had happened in other parts of the world.
Yes, and I know back in March, that's when the country started to shut down and just to slow the spread. And that did involve schools, and you guys originally were going to have off for just 2 weeks. Did you and do you know any other teachers who assumed that it would just be for 2 weeks and you guys would be able to return?
Well, we've never been through anything like that. You know, there's been blizzards, there's been floods, there's been electric outlet outages, there's been, water pipes broken. You know, there's been all kinds of things that have delayed or postponed or canceled school. But other than probably a blizzard or a flood, to have 2 full weeks out. So yeah, we thought it was just, we'll wait and see, it won't spread anymore, so we'll definitely be back within 2 weeks, or we'll definitely be back we'll be back by May, and then we realized that the transmission numbers are way too high to bring us back.
So, when did you realize that schools would be closed for the rest of the academic year?
Probably when we were getting more information about how to deliver content virtually, and also as just anybody watching the news releases and seeing just the numbers tick up and tick up and tick up, We just knew that they probably weren't going to bring people back to large spaces again. And I'm in a very large high school, over 1,500 students, over 130 faculty or staff report. So it's just difficult at that time with transmission the way it was to bring any size building, let alone large buildings, back.
Would it be easier or harder for a comeback between a large school like CD East and then like a smaller school like Middletown?
Well, at the end of the day, I think it's just space in general. It doesn't matter if you're a small school. If you do not have the space to have kids in other areas, to give them 6-foot distancing, to do directional traffic in your hallways, to limit access to larger areas like the auditorium, if you don't have a structure that allows you to spread people out, it doesn't really matter if you're small or large. But the larger you are, it would reason that you will have a increased chance of more transmission.
So we all know that this school year is definitely an eye opener, and I know there are a lot of fears with the new school year that's rapidly approaching. What is the thing you mostly fear about for this upcoming year?
Well, I'm taking all the precautions I can take for myself, for my students, and for my home. But it has required a lot of thinking about how you do things, what you touch, where other people touch. So for me, I might have a little bit more fear or precautions in place than somebody else because our household has concerns. We're a vulnerable household. So in terms of a professional fear, it's more just changing how we do things and how there has to be a three-prong approach. I will see some kids in person part of the week. I will see a different group in person the other part of the week. I will have a group that's completely remote 100% of the time. So from a professional standpoint, my fear is that I wouldn't, just that loss of doing it adequately enough.
So like
It's just a different learning curve.
Oh, I see. So with all the circumstances going on, like with the socially distancing right now, how are like classrooms going to be set up? Like, how are they going to set up like desks and tables so that way kids like are socially distancing and not?
Well, I can only speak to what I did in my classroom or what I've heard other people doing in their classrooms. I don't know what it looks like at the elementary or anything like that. In my classroom, I have science tables, so right away I'm not able to separate desks per se. I went through all my rosters to see how many days I will have when cohort A comes, how many kids I will have when cohort B comes. And I did as much single sitting at a table as I could. And I also, tables aren't touching. And where I had to I have two smaller desks off by themselves as well. And where I anticipate that I will have more than the 14 seats that I already have, I need a few more. I've kind of put them on the end of a table so that there's at least still 3 feet between them and the other person at that table. I went as far as to mark. There's a star at each place where that's the preferred place to sit. So if there's 12 or less in the room, they sit only at a star. I also made sure that we used all the depth we could so that I can get through kids by going through their rows, but I used the back space and the side space that give kids space. So I can still access them, but I can't really use the room the way I used to use the room. I have blocked off my own station. Kids won't be able to line up at the door to go at the bell. They'll have to wait to be dismissed. They have to come in and wash their hands right away because I'm lucky to have a sink. They'll have to wear their masks in my room.
How do you feel about you and kids wearing a mask for this year?
Well, I'm just going to explain to them why there are mask requirements, face covering requirements. I'm going to model it, and we're going to basically, it's a mask wearing culture now, so we are going to, educate, train, model, like we do anything else we have expectations for. So it's really just, it's not that different for us to have to model behavior and train for the behavior and expect the behavior. It's masks now.
So with everybody taking the precautions, like with what you said, since you have sinks in your room and like kids would have to wash hands, are teachers now being asked or required to have like hand sanitizer in their rooms?
It is suggested and recommended. It is not mandated. We have, in my building, we have hand sanitizing stations out in the hall. But individual rooms won't have hand sanitizer in them. I will have in my room.
Okay. And do you think? How would you think that with kids returning to that or in the year? How do you think they're feeling about this year? Do you think they're happy to be back or nervous with everything that's going on with the virus? Would you say they're happy to be back and not thinking about the virus, or would you say it's a kind of bit of a mixed emotion?
Well, I would think their choices demonstrated how they feel. I'm sure human nature, they wish that they were back in school, around their friends, doing what they've always done. But I also get that in a household where they may want the precaution of not being there, they've either chosen hybrid, that they'll come on their 2 days and remote the other 3 days, or they've chosen core or cyber. So I think the fears have already been addressed by the options. They have options, and whatever option they chose addresses how they're feeling about, I hesitate to use the word fear. I don't think it's fear necessarily to just take advantage of precautions.
And also with kids, how you were explaining how they're feeling about this year, do you think with what's going on right now will impact them academically?
Well, I do think there'll be a learning curve. Kids are going to think out of sight, out of mind, because that's natural. They're young. It is structured completely different. March was crisis. March was reaction. We have planned for this now. So in terms of the work being expected to be done and being graded, that's going to be like school always was. Assignments may look different though. You might not take a paper pencil test. You might complete a project or create a product, something that demonstrates a mastery of learning but doesn't have to be paper pencil related. I think in the long run, everybody, young and old, but particularly students right now, young or older learner students as well, they've learned a great lesson in how to reset, how to think outside the box, how to do things differently than maybe tradition dictated before.
So with the position students were put in back in March when this started to spread quickly, they now know from what the precautions were taking to be put in a situation like this.
Yes, they know that the precautions are there, they had options, and they also know what that option looks like in terms of academic expectations.
So to go along with academic expectations, my last question for you is this. With everything that went on back in March and with everything that's going on right now with the virus, could this possibly forever have an impact on education?
I think it remains to be seen, obviously, but I do think we have demonstrated that, the old saying, think outside the box. Well, now we can think outside the brick and mortar. And I do think maybe you'll see a trend in the next several years that maybe campuses are a little bit more open, similar to a college experience. You take online what you want to take online. You come onto campus for what you want to take. Change is slow, and breaking with tradition is slow. But I do think this kind of might start some real conversations about how we do things. I don't think it's going to change what you learn, because we're responsible for giving you a general education, but it might change how you learn what we expect you to learn.
All right, and thank you, thank you, Chris, or Mom, for your time here with us today about what's it going to be like for the next school year. And that is the end of Mitch's Minutes. I'm Mitch Carson. Thanks for watching. Take care of yourself.